At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
The 3 Down Greencast is brought to you by the Pile of Bones Brewing Company. Home delivery now available in Regina and Saskatoon at saskbeerdelivery.ca. Welcome to the 3 Down Greencast.
I love it.
A presentation of 3downnation.com. We are the internet's only CFL podcast. Joel Gasson with John Fraser as usual, and I know, yes, that intro was a bold-faced lie, but it is in honor of the podcast that has, in part, inspired this program, and that is the now defunct Shutdown Fullcast of Banner Society, previously SB Nation. We've chatted about them a little bit on the show in the past. We've made references to them in the past. I know especially when a friend of the show, Dan Plaster, is on for John.
Right.
As he is the one that got me into the Shutdown Fullcast. It was an interesting week as we learned Vox Media during this whole COVID-19 thing has decided to use it as an opportunity to slash a whole bunch of staff from SB Nation and Banner Society. Mm-hmm. And that included half of the Shutdown Fullcast and included basically half of their sister podcast, PAPN. Another good podcast, but not really an inspiration for this one because they're far more serious and, understand football at a level that most of us can't comprehend.
It's true. They're not so much into embracing the dumb like us, and where we get that from, being Shutdown Fullcast.
Exactly. And so, yeah, Spencer Hall and Jason Kirk were both let go temporarily for 3 months. But I think we're all pretty much understanding that that's probably the end of it. I don't foresee a world where Vox brings most of these guys back at this point, unfortunately. So that intro was in memory of what was the Shutdown Fullcast.
Well, and I think you gotta keep that going, Joel, because I mean that's a terrific intro. You used to always kind of just subtly nod to it with your little welcome, but now you have to continue doing it just as over the top because your old welcome was it was a nod, and now that the podcast is gone, I think you got to go completely full out. And you're right, I don't think they're coming back because as you and I were discussing, they kind of went out in their last episode burning bridges with atomic fire. Mm-hmm. I thought I did things, pretty well with the bridge burning when I left my last radio employer, sending not actual time bombs across the office, but telling people things that actually made me unhappy that I knew they'd bring up 2 or 3 months later. I did that a lot. And these guys were basically just boom. If your podcast palette is full, listen to the last episode and just go, wow, these guys are pissed.
Yeah. Even Ryan and Holly, who have escaped the furlough for now, were also not exactly mincing their words, even though they remain employed by Vox Media at this point. And the part that stuck out for me was the really interesting part where Ryan's telling the story of a discussion he had with someone at Vox Media about their podcast, because they did basically a whole, ask me anything. They had a document up where we could ask questions, the whole thing, before they recorded.
Right.
And the question centered around basically, did anyone at Vox Media ever talk to you about the podcast? And for the most part, the answer was no. They were basically, thankfully, free to do whatever they want with it, which was amazing. Right. It led to, if you have time to go back and listen to the last catalog, even the last couple of years, I'd highly recommend it. If you're a college football fan or you're looking to get in college football and understand the side of college football that isn't just the top Power 5 schools, this is the place to do it. PAPN as well. And It was a fascinating conversation that Ryan brought us in on a little bit, because they said they felt the Shutdown Fullcast was too insider. There's too many inside jokes. People just couldn't pick it up midstream. Even though that's a bold-faced lie, because Dan Plaster and I both picked it up midstream and we turned out fine with it. So, I mean, it's not impossible. You have to understand college football, but that's true of any college football podcast, because that's the niche. That's what they were targeting.
And that's with us at the CFL. You have to have an understanding of the CFL to enjoy what the hell we're talking about.
Exactly. If we were so owned by some big company and they're like, and so they pointed to this unnamed Vox guy, pointed to a tweet from Spencer Hall that was promoting a show at one point that they did, I believe in Jacksonville, or Birmingham, it doesn't matter where it was. Anyway, And it was a picture. It was because the show was taking place at a karaoke bar. It was a photoshopped picture of Nick Saban doing karaoke. And the Vox Media guy says, "See, who is that? Who is that? That's only like the most popular name and face in all of college football. If you don't know who that is, that's not a show problem. That's a you problem. That you're not understanding what this show is about, and shows how completely out of touch Vox Media, who acquired this group, was with the entire operation."
Yeah. You don't know.
That would be like if someone bought 3 Down Nation, like, oh, I don't know who this tweet, and it's Bo Levi Mitchell, and then like, who's that?
Right?
Like, come on.
I mean, my interest in college football is growing largely because of my relationship with you.
Mm-hmm. Even if you had a very rudimentary understanding of college football, you would know who Nick Saban is.
And that's what I was about to say. Like, leading into the seasons before, you and I have been friends, and you and I have watched games together, I still knew who Nick Saban was, and I think I watched maybe, like, the BCS championship every year.
Yeah, because he was in, like,
games.
He was in at least half of the national championships for the last, like, 10 years.
Exactly. So yeah, I knew who Nick Saban was. So clearly, wow, they must have really dug up this guy under a rock that knew nothing. Yeah,
it was a remarkable conversation. Yes, if you are into bridge burnings, it is a fantastic listen, and I would highly recommend listening to it as much as you possibly can. Through the back catalog, everything. I'm hopeful for a return of it of some kind someday. I know Jason's already got another side project going on that I'll probably check out. I don't really know what it has to do with yet, but there'll be something out there at least from one of them. So yeah, I just hope there's some kind of return for them at some point, because it was such a fun listen, and it was such a distraction from everything all the time. And I know everyone does a podcast these days, and there's billions of podcasts out there, and they're like the it thing right now, but listenership still isn't that huge for podcasts, like really in the grand scheme of things. It's all about a loyal listenership, and they had it. And this is the other side that Fox, I don't think, quite wrapped their heads around this yet, was so Ryan actually divulged their numbers on the episode, which I thought was fascinating. He said, we are about 16 to 19,000 a week, which is actually a pretty good number for podcasts.
It's a huge number for podcasts.
It's a huge number. So I believe it puts them in a pretty high percentage of, podcasts in the United States. Forget college football, forget sports just in general.
Yeah.
And just the stories that came out after, how loyal this audience is. If you can get that number every week, the fact that maybe it wasn't working for your business wasn't the podcast's problem. It was your inability to sell a loyal audience. That is crazy for this podcast, because two of their main sponsors have put up products for sale now to basically support all the Vox Media guys, or at least the Banner Society guys that have been furloughed through this. And they're like selling these t-shirts and hats hand over fist to support them. So
crazy.
Way to go, Vox. You blew it.
Yeah. Well, see, it's funny, you look at the loyal listener base. Here we are with, a decent number of listeners per week, or per whenever we put it out. And, you talk to loyal listeners, I can't even get my father-in-law to listen to this thing. So,
and he's a football fan, so.
Exactly. He's a football fan and one of the best humans you'll ever meet, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, realistically, like, I understand. Like, I'm not, this isn't a shot at a podcast audience. Let's be real here. Everyone picks a handful, a couple that they listen to, because frankly, who has the time to sit down and listen to every single podcast about a topic they like? So if you can get, between 15 and 20,000 people a week listening to your podcast, that company really should have done a better job monetizing it.
No, 1,000,000%. I'm with you all the way.
It's, of course, draft week in the world of football. I guess draft 2 weeks, technically.
Yes.
The NFL draft happened. The CFL draft will be happening. We're going to get into all of that as usual. But as usual, John, before we get into all that, what's in the glass this week?
Well, as I continue my my enjoyment of local vodka and pink lemonade, I'm once again going with the LB vodka with a little bit of Crystal Light mixed in. But going back to Sunday, one of the first days that we were allowed to, going back to Saturday, one of the first days we were allowed to, see other family members and get out of our houses and have a barbecue. Went over to the mother and father-in-laws and wisely picked up the Rebellion Variety Pack. It's into the summer season right now, so you got your Blast Off, your Lentil in there, your Amber, and your Cerveza. So 4 of the, and again, it's one of those that if you're not even a huge craft beer fan, that's a great one to get, that you can support some local businesses with, I would say, 3 out of the 4 selections there, you can just like your regular beers and you'll enjoy what's in that case.
Yeah, even the amber is a really nice, light, easy drinking amber. So if you like that sort of style from the big guys, you'll definitely like that one as well. For me, absolutely. I am drinking the beer, the official beer, I guess, of the 3 Down Nation Greencast. 3 Down Greencast, that is, of course, the Pile of Bones White IPA, as, of course, yes, summer is here, I guess spring is here. I guess summer is not here. It feels like summer because winter's always so cold, but really it's not summer yet.
Well, I think too with like it feels like I've got an extra summery feel because as we start to, some restrictions have been loosened here in the province right around the same time that the weather has started to feel nice, right? It felt very much had that summer vibe heading over to Don and Bonnie Bohay's place, with a case of beer, as they are, as all jokes aside, I do love them both dearly. I kept saying to them, I'm like, well, according to the government, you're the only people we can hang out with, so we don't really have a choice right now.
Yeah, you're stuck with us now. CFL draft is, of course, right around the corner, but before all that happened, last week was the NFL draft, and to me, the real story of the NFL draft wasn't so much the draft for the players or ESPN's numerous attempts to make us feel something for these players with their continuous stream of sap stories for just about every single one of them that the internet definitely had enough of.
Yes. Oh God. Anybody. It was like you could find a sad tale for every. Like, I wish they would have had more stuff as an aside. Like the one kid, I can't remember. I was watching while I was doing dishes. I was only half paying attention. But they're like, "Hey, this guy, he's a great singer as well, and he sang a little bit." I'm like, "That's awesome! I wish I knew more about that instead of like his dead third cousin who had cancer of the eyeball that he had to dedicate his 3rd season of Pee Wee football to."
Yeah, it became a bit much after a while for sure. But for me, it was a really fascinating draft to watch, just because number one. Just the different, just how everything had to smoothly come together. Like ESPN did one hell of a job.
Oh God, yes.
With the actual physical broadcast of that whole thing, working that many different, internet-based connections and having their people at home across the internet and this host trying to bring it all together when usually you're in a room full of people and there's this energy and you're able to work off it. There was nothing. He's basically in a room by himself talking to screens, and this thing worked off perfectly. I think Roger Goodell was hit and miss in terms of his little segments, but overall, it was a very entertaining broadcast and a very well done broadcast, and yes. I would argue better than what the draft normally is, and it's, from what I've seen online, not the only one thinking this, that maybe the NFL needs to work more of these elements into their draft going forward.
Well, and I didn't think it was hot take city, which was one thing I liked, which as you mentioned, the energy in the room. It's hard to get into a spirited debate or get into making these assumptions on a player, because you passionately feel a way about somebody when again, you're looking at a computer screen or you're looking at a TV screen, right? So that's what I liked. I liked a lot of the rhetoric was gone. Much less sob stories, but I mean, it was still unique in the fact that, okay, yeah, we all got hammered over the head with sob stories, but they still had a lot of pre-produced things for a lot of these guys. Yeah. And I thought that was kind of cool.
Well, I mean, it was so easy for them, and we'll get to this in a second. Basically, all the players taken were Power 5 players, so it's pretty easy to find out the stuff on them. And have footage of all of them. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, I just mean, too, like, being able to do the research and finding out, like a gluttony of sob stories, it was what we kind of came up with, just because you probably had, let's face it, as a sports reporter, that's kind of what you're looking for. And they probably had a local guy in every market say, well, this guy had this happen, this guy had that happen, rather than, finding out a player's hidden talents or things like that. Right. So I wish at the end of the day, they would have had a meeting and been like, okay, we have 74 sob stories. Does anybody have anything different?
Is there anything fun about any of these guys? Like, come on.
Exactly. Like again, more about the singing or the one guy with the protein shake from hell with like the 7 eggs in it and like a gallon of peanut butter. Like I want to know what these guys are having in their like protein shakes that I would never attempt. Like, I love stuff like that, but yeah, couple sob stories, I get it, but for sure. Like even when you're sob story Joe Burrow, Like, you had the entire offseason to find out something cool about Joe Burrow. Let's talk about his dad winning a Grey Cup or something like that. I found it was rougher off the start. Like, again, referencing the Joe Burrow pick, like, we all knew Burrow was going number one to Cincinnati. And I tuned in, and it was like, every one of the talk, and that was my fear at first, was like, every one of the talking heads was like, yep, this guy has the best accuracy I've ever seen, best college quarterback I've ever seen. He's going to be the greatest. He's going to be great for Cincinnati, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, shit, I just listened to 5 guys say the exact same thing. I'm like, how's this going to go? And then they ramped it up. It was just hard.
Okay. Yeah, like, I get it for Joe Burrow was hard because what's there to say about the guy who had one of the best seasons you'll ever see in college football? Right.
But
like, and even at that, like, I saw the numbers of, like, on TSN, like, they put out the numbers of the ratings, and it was the highest rated ever, and it, like, some of 900,000 people tuned in over the course of the 12 hours it was on the first day, and and then they talked about how it peaked at like 834 or something, and I was like, okay, so that was about the first 3 picks, which were all pretty chalk, and they were going to be pretty chalk. We knew Burrow was going number 1. We knew Chase Young was going number 2. There's a little bit of question after that, but for the most part, that's where it was going to go. It was after that is where the draft got interesting, but that's when everyone tuned out. So it goes to show where that draft really does stand within Canadian interest, so to speak. But I just thought that was an interesting little tidbit, because I was like, once Tua went, I'm like, okay, that's the first interesting thing, because there was some talk about what was going to happen with him because of his injuries, but Miami didn't make the mistake again. And then from there, I was like, okay, now what's going to happen, because now the draft starts for real.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, my NFL allegiances fall with the Minnesota Vikings, and Packers Twitter for the first 2 rounds might have been my favorite thing ever.
Well, Packers Twitter wrote the whole thing because they didn't draft like a single receiver again.
No, they didn't, which was hilarious.
In one of the best classes of receivers we've seen in years.
Exactly. So what is your number one need? You have a team that was a win away from the Super Bowl last year, desperately needs some talent at wideout, and they go quarterback, running back, 2 positions they're stacked at in the first 2 rounds. And it was just like, watching it burn was just, it was making my night.
Yeah, that was definitely an interesting move, and the Eagles going with Jalen Hurts was an interesting move as well.
Yeah, absolutely, especially with Carson Wentz sitting there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest Carson Wentz guy. It's like, I know he's good, and there's still something about him too that I'm like, I don't know. He's fragile, number 1, but they've seemed to have done better when he's not in the lineup. Is the only thing I'm going to say about that.
No, that's true. That's.
And then there was the interesting point that Adam Schefter brought up after the draft, talking about there are some thoughts within NFL circles of, okay, you need a really good backup this year in case your quarterback gets sick.
And that's,
which, I mean, you know what? There's some truth to that logic for sure.
Well, exactly. Even if they are back playing games, and depending on the
NFL is going to push as hard as they can to at least play in front of empty stadiums.
Well, yeah, I mean, they've got all the revenue streams in the world, but you're right. Like, even if somebody breaks quarantine, and next thing you know, you gotta miss 14 days while you're waiting to be cleared from your COVID test, or make sure you don't have symptoms, then yeah, you might need 2 guys. I mean, it's almost like the CFL, where you just need 2 guys because somebody always ends up dead every single year.
Yeah, and so what was really interesting also about the NFL draft and how it applies more so to the CFL, I mean, number 1, we know Chase Claypool and Devil and the guy from Ottawa aren't going. They're not going to be drafted. Those guys are not coming up north anytime soon. No. I will say, as a Steelers fan, I'm absolutely thrilled that they got Chase Claypool in round 2.
I was pumped for you. Like, I was ecstatic for you. He is like the attitude on Chase Claypool, and I think I was texting you about that. Mm-hmm. You see so many guys, even looking back to Tim Tebow, that I don't want to be a tight end. Claypool basically came out and said, "Put me wherever. Mm-hmm. I want to play.
Yeah,
put me at wide out. Put me at tight end. Put me at slot back. Wherever you put me, I want to play. I want to play ball, and I want to be on this team." And you're like, okay, that's the kind of guy you want coming to college, along with his physical talents and gifts and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, he's been a piece of the Steelers kind of been missing, that sort of that red zone threat, that big body threat. So I think there's an easy fit there, especially if Big Ben can stay healthy this year. But from a CFL perspective, the NFL draft was interesting to me, not so much because the Canadians taking and the UDFA signed after the draft. it was interesting by the fact that I wonder how this could actually maybe help the CFL in the short term, the way this draft went, because of how few picks were taken outside of the Power 5. I don't remember the exact numbers in front of me, but it was a large majority of players were taken from Power 5 schools, basically because there were no pro days this year, except for a select few that happened to get in before everything kind of shut down. And because there wasn't really the chance for teams that may want to kind of beaten the unbeaten path, except for Bill Belichick, who still took a Div 2 guy in the second round. But of course, that's what he does, and the Patriots draft record is kind of spoke for itself recently. Not great, but whatever it is. So could this, and this is all dependent on whether we get a season this year or not, and it's increasingly, there's reasons to be increasingly skeptical over that happening. I think the question becomes, for a GM who's willing to put in the work and willing to really dig through some deep film, could there be some diamond in the rough Americans available? And I think the question over the next year or two, the answer to that should be yes, because, Joe Smith out of Middle Utah State, who may have normally been maybe a 6th-round pick in the NFL, some team willing to take on a chance on a guy who's a little raw but has some ability that no one else has seen, suddenly wasn't taken.
Right, and you're bang on with that, Joel. When you're not scouting in person, you don't get the benefit of seeing, BF Nowhere State in Div 3 could have some freakishly athletic 6'6" wideout, but plays a single wing offense, right? Mm-hmm. Like you could just have they could have a quarterback that can't hit. I remember when Rashawn Simonides played the brief appearance he made in the Canadian Junior Football League in the same calendar year that he was with the NFL Cincinnati Bengals. Mm-hmm. That was a guy that had legitimate NFL talent, but was playing with CJFL quarterbacks that couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, right?
Yeah.
So that's
or you're on a team that has a revolving door of an offensive line or something like that, right? Yeah.
Exactly, and that's where those guys are found. And as you mentioned, now you are going to have the time to go through, look through film, work your American scouts, work your, guys you've known forever that know a guy that knows a guy that's seen this guy play in high school in college and maybe before that in high school, and go out and see them, right? So I think the teams that this falls right into the Riders' hands.
Yeah. Well, they've already started doing it. Like basically anyone they've signed this offseason has been a who?
Right?
So
you've had the odd guy that had some NFL pedigree, but for the most part, we get the emails from Ariel and it's like, what? I've never heard of this guy. And again, it benefits the Riders with the deep pockets that, they can still keep people on the payroll to be watching film and to be, looking for these guys because...
Oh, I guarantee you, right now, without, a lot of the scouts, the scouting staff and, guys like Chad Hudson, the quality control guys who maybe don't have as much to do right now, they're probably just watching film 12 hours a day every day.
Oh, certainly. I would argue the entire coaching staff and the entire organization's just watching film every single day looking for that guy.
Well, and that was an interesting discussion, and this is a little off topic, that they had on PAPN, where it was, if there's college football this year, how crazy and how developed are the offenses and defenses going to be, because all of these coaches and staffs and these guys aren't on the recruiting trail this year. They're just at home watching film basically 20 hours a day. So they have a lot more time to self-scout their own teams right now, which could make, and I think it's applicable across football, should there be football this year, could make for some interesting wrinkles, I think.
Yeah, no, I would certainly agree. I mean, especially if you look at a CFL season that's and every take I'm going to have this episode is based on my core belief that the CFL season does not happen this year. Mm-hmm. I absolutely do not think it is going to happen. And, until we get definitive word from because it looks like, we're starting to see some early rumblings of that, as Dunk said, we might see the bomb go off that everybody's a free agent next year, right? Which would be just absolute madness. But yeah, I think that a team, because the Riders have the pockets to pay more guys to get their eyes on, Div 3 games, and it's going to benefit them. And you look at a team like Calgary that's always drafted so well and signed guys so well, it's going to be a huge benefit to them. So I think, to me, the strong are going to get stronger. The teams are going to be hurt are the Toronto Argonauts of the world that, that they don't have a deep American scouting staff.
No. But I mean, John Murphy does have a network down there, so that probably helps them a little bit.
That's true. But yeah, Murph's network is basically all they're counting on, but I don't even know if they'd have, who knows with 102 regime changes down there, if they'd even have anybody sitting around outside of Murphy's network. Which,
there probably wouldn't be a whole lot of guys on the payroll, but
right.
Yeah.
And are those Murphy guys maybe talking to Jeremy O'Day already? That's the other interesting thing, right? So it's just, I think the next 2 years of talent that you're going to see coming out of the States is going to be, I think you will see an increase in that 1 or 2 season and done guys, but
yeah,
who cares? That's part of being the second best football league in the world.
That's part of football, period. Like, there's how many guys? There's countless guys in the NFL that are like that too. So
yeah, exactly. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So we all get in towards it now as we're working towards it today. The CFL draft is, of course, on Thursday. We're recording this on Monday, so if you're listening to this on Friday, you already know what happened, and I apologize for being spectacularly wrong.
Well, that's fair.
One thing I do hope TSN does with this broadcast, because I believe, it's going to be, we're used to kind of the remote CFL broadcast, like CFL draft. This is not new to them. Like, the way the NFL GMs and coaches and everyone were complaining and moaning about this possibility months ago, not only number one looked completely tone deaf, but number two was completely ridiculous, because CFL guys are like, I don't know, we do this all the time, so I mean, whatever. Yeah, we're not going to be in the same room like we normally are, but whatever, we'll figure it out. It's basically the approach CFL general managers and coaches have taken to this, which is good. And I hope we do get a glimpse into their lives a little bit, like we did all these NFL coaches and GMs. Because one of the most entertaining things I really enjoyed was all the, seeing basically how they all lived. Because there was such and it won't be quite to the extreme in the CFL like it was in the NFL. Like, I can guarantee you there isn't a single coach or general manager in the CFL living in a house like Cliff Kingsbury's.
Oh, God, absolutely not.
That thing was one of the talks of the NFL draft. When I saw that, I was like, holy crap!
Yeah,
does he live on the Ballers set? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, that was ridiculous, his place. And then, am I the only one surprised that, that not surprised, I should say, that Bill Belichick's kitchen with the dog in it might have looked like it was off the set of Roseanne. It just looked looked like your grandma's kitchen.
Yeah, there was the extremes of, really swanky places and Jerry Jones's, spaceship. And then there was the other group of guys who were, in a townhouse basement or in a room with no windows or in their grandma's room or something like that. There was no real in between.
Right. And I'm glad to, and you and I have talked about this a couple of times, and you've mentioned on social media and on this podcast, at what point, coming out of this all, do we all agree that dressing up for work is stupid?
Oh, it's incredibly stupid.
Right, you're seeing all the NFL head coaches and the families and the draft picks all just rocking out in t-shirts and shorts and everything. Doesn't make me think anything less.
No.
If anything, I think anything more of the only thing I'm thinking of there is Kingsbury's he's got this mansion and he's wearing dress shoes indoors with shorts. That's.
Well, who was it? I forget. I forget which player was taken that was just wearing a bathrobe.
Or at when they cut to Mike Vrabel's house,
Mike Vrabel's
see the guy in the see the guy in the reflection, obviously taking a dump.
Mike Vrabel disputes that. He says his son was just sitting on a stool. And there is a start of the video. If you look closely, you kind of see him spinning around a little bit. So he wasn't actually taking a dump there.
What, you don't spin around on the toilet?
Not the way he was.
Well, then I should tell you the things I did to your upstairs bathroom there, Joel Gasson.
Okay, well, anyway, regardless of Poopgate, the rest of it, when we went to that shot, I thought, so there was the guy in the full green man suit, but it was blue and white.
Right.
And then there was, I believe these are all his kids, because they're clearly a bunch of weirdos like him, because he's not exactly a normal dude either. And the one with the mullet in the football jersey, I could have sworn was just a cutout at first. It didn't look like an actual human being. And then they went back to him, and then he moved, and I was like, what? That's an actual person?
Mike,
it was
Mike
incredible.
Vrabel,
that was to me, that was the moment of the draft. The other moment of the draft, that I also really enjoyed was, I believe it was the New York Giants general manager.
Right.
They went to the shot of him in this big open room, all white. And for some reason he decided, okay, I'm going to put this one Giants rally towel off the back of one of my computers. And that's the only decoration in the entire room. And it was incredible.
We didn't know if the walls were patterned or not. We couldn't tell, right? I mean, if you're the GM of the New York Giants, I'm pretty sure I'd make it the pads on the wall. Make sure there's no sharp objects nearby.
So what I'm saying is, TSN, please give us the shots of these guys at home. I hope at least one of them is mildly entertaining. I brought it up in the 3 Down Green chat, in the 3 Down Nation group chat. I was like, if TSN does this, I'm going to rank their draft setups. And I believe it was Ryan Ballantyne said, because he likes fishing, obviously, Huffnagel's going to be on a laptop in a canoe in the middle of the water fishing.
It's true, and
Which would be incredible.
That would be incredible, and I just think it's too bad that that we couldn't have the live draft day coverage because of COVID of me and you just sitting there drafting different beers and just getting smashed on some sort of 3 Down Nation. So hopefully by the trade deadline of not this coming year, because there won't be a season, but the year after, everything's cleared up and we can just hang out and stream us just getting fucking, pardon me, just getting really, really hammered and, talking about the trade deadline or the beers we're drinking.
Potentially, yeah. So as for the actual draft itself, I mean, to me, there isn't really, at least from a rider perspective, not a ton to look forward to.
Right.
I think Haji wrote the piece well on 3 Down Nation during his Canadian content series a few weeks back. That there isn't really a glaring hole for the riders. I don't think there's, in the past you would say, okay, they need this or they need that.
Right.
And I wrote the preview piece for 3 Down Nation. It may or may not be out by the time you listen to this podcast. I don't know the exact release schedule for all the team previews that are being released this week. But, it was basically a general, they've kind of recovered from after starting in 2014, where there was a few years where the Canadian depth was just depleted so much that Chris Jones had to overspend in free agency to make sure they just had enough guys who could start. And now you could say they have easily 7 starters. They may have even 8 or 9 if you really want to stretch it. So to me, it's okay, it all starts up front. There's Cameron Judge, obviously, on defense. You got Zach Evans and McKenna Henry's getting pretty good, too. And then you got the 3 guys in the middle of the offensive line. That's kind of the core of it. And then you can move some pieces around with Mike Edem and the receivers and the whole thing around that after that. And so for me, it's okay, all they really need to do in the draft, which this works out well for them, only having a first-round pick and then they don't pick again until the 4th round, is, okay, if you can get some backups behind any of those guys that were listed, your core starting Canadians, that's good. If you can get some speed and some youth on special teams, that's good. Even if they really want to, there's an opportunity for them to take a flyer on a guy who may be in the NFL this year, which is, of course, the Chris Jones special. One of them paid off in Dakota Shepley. We're still waiting on some others, but for the most part, there's an opportunity there for them. If it's late in the draft, they've kind of, added some depth to the roster already. This is something they could do, especially if you were correct and there's no season, then there's really nothing lost this year. And so it's kind of boring from our perspective. And, as a media guy, you want to come into the draft saying, oh, you really need to, need to watch this. I'm like, I don't know. They just need a bunch of backups. And that's kind of boring to say, but it's true.
But I think this whole draft will be very intriguing because I think we're going to have a whole bunch of who picks when it comes down to it. And to me, the ultimate indication that there will not be a season this year is if you see GMs going off the board and going for NFL talent and going for Project Canadians, like guys with a couple years of U Sports eligibility left. If you see those guys start going earlier than the 4th and 5th round, which we would normally see, that these guys are my belief that there's not going to be a season, right? I think this is the year that every single, I think Jeremy O'Day, if there's somebody there you love in the 1st round, go out and get him. But I think in the 4th round, again, with my firm belief there's not going to be a season, this is when you take your project guys. You got to look at this draft year as almost bonus picks. Right? Like even if there is a season, as you mentioned before we started recording, it's probably not starting till around Labor Day. Mm-hmm. And you might have those guys back from the NFL in time for this, right? So if I'm a CFL GM this year, I'm going off the boards thinking of this as it's almost like, remember when the Ottawa Redblacks, what was it, a year before the expansion draft or a year before they started playing, could draft in that one round, and they drafted a bunch of project guys.
Yep. Yeah, they were allowed to take basically guys a year before they're eligible. Basically, I think.
Exactly.
Something like that.
And if I'm a CFL GM, we've both talked about our guys. Like, maybe there is that 6'6" Canadian kid playing down at BF Nowhere State that normally you wouldn't get a chance at, but B, normally you'd want to see him pan out for another year. This is the year you take him. And again, I'm going to be more interested in the draft in that way, seeing the direction in which, the GMs go. I would say there'd be optimism for a season if all of these guys are like graduated dominant U Sports guys or NCAA guys that for sure are coming to Canada. But if you see those guys coming off the board that are maybes on coming to Canada, or maybes continuing their careers and not becoming police officers or firemen or something like that, that's where there might be a season. But that's what I'm going to be looking for, and that's what I'd be doing if I was a GM this year.
Yeah, I mean, we could see a mix of it too. I think there could be some teams that take the approach of that they're going forward thinking that the season's going to start at some point, and there may be some coaches who don't believe that. So it'll all come down to philosophies, and I believe most teams are going to act on the thought that there will be some kind of season this year. I think you would be doing your franchise a disservice if you didn't otherwise, unless you knew 100% for sure there wasn't going to be a season. And at that point, there wasn't really much point in holding a draft, quite frankly. So I think you still have to prepare like there's going to be some kind of season, because if you think, okay, well, there's not going to be season and act accordingly, you're suddenly going to get screwed. If there suddenly is football for some reason.
Right. And you're exactly right. But that's why I want to see, even if there is all of a sudden football this season, and you and I mentioned it with the Riders having no outstanding needs, this is the year to go crazy, go nuts. This is the year to get real wacky. And this is the year to get real crazy and get some of those guys that may or may not turn out. Again, Dakota Shipley, right? Like, I'd love them to take a guy you want to, is going to play in the first round. I think you'd be stupid not to. Mm-hmm. But after that, again, with them not having a pick to the fourth round, I want to see like 4 or 5 Dakota Shipleys taken.
I mean, it would be far more interesting for me to write about after, that's for sure.
Oh, certainly, right? I mean, let's think of Joel here. Come on, Jeremy O'Day.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.